Hello and good morning and welcome and good afternoon to everybody in different time zones. My name is Carron Little and I'm the founder and organizer of Out of Sight Chicago. Today I am in conversation with CV Peterson about her performance practice, and she is a multidisciplinary artist. I am coming to you. I'm residing on the ancestral homelands of the Council of Three Fires, the Adawa, the Ojibwe, and the Potawatomi nations. Out of Sight as an organization is particularly concerned in the questions of site, S-I-T-E, and place. And we have dedicated our 10 years of practice to working in public space. And Out of Sight is about looking at what's invisible. And when we think about what is invisible, we're really interested in cultivating a dialogue around place and site and looking at the invisible questions. So, and as part of that, we are organizing a public performance symposium, and I'll be giving a little presentation and answering questions about that at the end of today's conversation. So without further ado, I want to introduce CV Peterson. So I met you in 2014. I think. Oh, I lost CV for a minute. But CV Peterson is from Eau Claire and Chicago. They are a multidisciplinary artist who combines scientific explorations of art and art to examine human-caused environmental devastation. Their work takes a whimsical, dark, and playful view of what the planet would be like after humanity is extinct. CV has exhibited at the CICA Museum in South Korea, the Shanghai Zhuchan Art Museum in China, the Chicago Architectural Biennale, the Nobel Conference on Climate Change hosted by Gustavus Adolphus College, and was toured through Europe by Universal C. They have performed at international performance festivals such as Out of Sight Chicago, the Performance Arcade in New Zealand, and Detroit's Forward Fringe Festival. They were in a residency at Artelis Creative Center, Haikurvi, Finland. Am I pronouncing all these correctly?
Close enough.
And their current work of fungal sculptures are sponsored by Evocative Design or Ecovative Design. They received their MFA and BFA at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, where we met, as well as a BA from Gustavus Adolphus College, where they graduated Magna Cum Laude and received the Phi Beta Kappa Award. CV has curated eco-art exhibitions in Chicago and Eau Claire, Wisconsin. They currently teach at UWEC in the Honors Department, and they are the founder of Envisage Retreat. And it is wonderful to be with you here today. I think we first met when I was decked out as Queen of Luxuria, standing outside of Defibrillator's first original space. And maybe that was 2014 actually. And then we've intersected a lot, and then you performed for Out of Sight in 2015 with a durational work. But we're going to start by presenting. Do you have a few words to say?
No, this has been, thank you for having me. I also would like to acknowledge that my studio occupies the sacred and ancestral indigenous peoples' lands, and I honor the Ojibwa and the Dakota nations. But I am honored to be here.
Thank you. So this first piece is called Hydraulic Architecture. And a big shout out to Laura Mitchell, who was and Lester Mitchell, who were the videographers, and Laura Mitchell, who has done all of Out of Sight edits since 2013, was also the editor on this project. So without further ado, I will the screen. And this next piece that we're going to, well, do you want to say a few words about what we just saw, CV?
Yeah, sure. So hydraulic agriculture has been exhibited at the CICA Museum in South Korea, as well as at Ripon College in Ripon, Wisconsin. And it is a piece that I really consider more of the jumping off piece for what I'm currently exploring. This was a experiment back in 2015, and it really, the questions it brought forward after creating it and the discussions I've had since it have really shaped where my current practice is definitely going.
So this next piece was a live stream performance that CV did for Out of Sight in 2020, and it's called Mykitos Epoch.
Corin, I'm not hearing the sound.
Hello, we don't have sound. Or maybe it is, Oh, I know why. Okay. Let us start again. I know why. Oops. Where's it gone? Working on a small computer. Oh, it should say, it should, Tell me.
Can you hear?
Why, hello. Welcome to the Mykitos Epoch Happy Hour. I am your host today, as well as your mixologist, CV Peterson, and we will be making a concoction inspired by science. That's right, we are going to be making a mocktail cocktail, truly a mocktail, inspired by Dr. Sherry Mason's publication entitled The Anthropogenic Contamination of Tap Water, Beer, and Sea Salt. Or as what we're going to be calling it today, environmental whoopsie. For this cocktail, mocktail, mix it up, we will be creating a saltwater elixir that is saturated and played around with some plastic. Like any good happy hour, do all of you have your libations? Not only is it happy hour and we're enjoying beverages, but in Dr. Sherry Mason's publication, she stated that actually, fun fact, beer has 4.05 particles of plastic per liter. So not only is this fun celebratory beverage, but keep a daily dose of plastic. And I mean, we're creating a plastic-based ecosystem anyways, right, guys? I mean, like with like the 2 dump trucks roughly a day of plastic we're putting into the ocean, might even be more than that. Like, how can we not just love to indict ourselves in our community with it, right? Our ecosystems, plastic. Fun fact as well, though, is salt particularly in salt water, now contains 212 particles of plastic per kilogram. Season that steak, mix up that salad, throw in a little resin polymer with your sea salt. Tasty. Turns out on average, this is the fun part, on average, the average person ingests 5,800 particles of plastic a year. Real tasty. Real tasty. And that's what we're working on today, folks. We're going to make our own little plastic ecosystems. Yes, we are. Ready? Voila. So right here we have some hot water that we are mixing with some salt, right? So there's my sea salts, right? Let's pour in a good dose. Salt crystals are actually starting to form on plastic, and so in this cocktail that we're creating, we're actually wanting to heighten that, right? This is more like an aged cocktail. You got to let it like sit for roughly a month or so. So you saw the sea salt elixir, right? It's brewing, boil, bubble and trouble, right? And so I thought I would start us off with a cocktail classic, right? The fishbowl, right? We all have memories of the fishbowl. Or maybe not. Maybe it's more like your friends have memories of you with the fishbowl. Anyways, spring break classic, summer classic right here. So we're going to start out with adding some condiments, right? Before we add the elixir of plastic salt. So first, Mardi Gras beads, right? These are fun, these are festive, make you forget about all sorts of things going on in the world, right? Next, let's do some loofahs, right? Rub-a-dub-dub. Hopefully 3 men in a tub, right? Am I right? So loofahs, right? Lovely plastic, keeps us clean, keeps us fresh, inspired by a real thing, a real organic thing, right? I just feel cleaner already. Throw that in, right? What else do we have? It's fun things, right? So those little plastic frogs, right, that we have as kids. You can see this. Oh, oopsies. That one ran away. Kind of like the one that I did when I was a child. It ended up in the garden. We found it 30 years later. Anyways. Ooh, dinosaurs. Dinosaurs, plastic dinosaurs. I mean, nieces, nephews, children, ourselves, intoxicated adults, right? We love these things. Fun fact, though, the dinosaurs actually on the timeline of the planet's existence lived exponentially longer than we've lived so far. Yeah. No, they've left behind our bones. We're leaving behind a plastic crust, right? Turns out we're actually changing rock formations. They're incorporating plastic. Yeah, read about it. The scientists have found the newest ones in Hawaii. Toy soldiers, right? Pew, 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 pew. You know, because we love killing each other. All the fun. Oops, nearly ended up in my beer. Oh my. So once again, plastic container. I'm totally down for this plastic-based ecosystem. So good. Actually, we'll just unscrew it. We'll just unscrew it right here. Perfect. Saltwater elixir. So freaking tasty. Good. And now, for this particular cocktail, we let it sit, right? Up to a month actually is best. It lets the salt crystals really grow on it, right? So I'm going to quickly move this baby over here. I bring forth some pre-made ones, right? Some examples. Okay. The fun thing is adding hot water into the plastic that's colored, right? It really colors the water there. And then here we have this one, right? And so after about, the camera is showing too many things. Okay, we're gonna focus on these three, yeah. So these ones have been aging, right? And so you can kind of see the salt crystals up here, right? As the water evaporates, it leaves the crystals, it grows on the salt product, right? Grows on it, look at those salt crystals. You can kind of see it here too on some of that plarn, right? On the outside, right here. Yeah, beautiful salt crystals, Because it turns out, it turns out, right, that the salt crystals break down the plastic a little bit, but doesn't actually decompose it, right? No, it just breaks it down into the nurdles that I described before. And nurdles actually will be evaporated along with water particles into the air. So even those of you who are like, oh, CV, we don't use much plastic and we're really good at recycling, don't worry. Plastic's now in the sky, it gets rained, and rain clouds don't care about country borders, so you got it too. No worries, it's all good. You get to enjoy it as well. Enjoy these plastic ecosystems, right? Perfect, perfect. So that's the end of my plastic-based ecosystem.
Hello and welcome back. I know that when I first saw the rehearsal for that, for Mykitos Epoch, I was in hysterics. So I want to, we've lost CV at a moment, so we keep having a bit of connection issue. But I wanted to go back and reflect on the first video, hydraulic architecture, and thinking about how CV is employing signs and signifiers of gender bending into... Hello, welcome back. We keep having a little bit of a misconnection this morning. So I was just talking about the signs and the signifiers in hydraulic architecture. And I wanted to ask, and looking at these signs of gender bending that is so prevalent in all of your work, there is, knowing you and over a long period of time, there is an androgyny that is employed in the identity of your performative self. And can you discuss this reclamation of personhood that you are, that really holds a presence, and particularly holds a presence in that piece you did, and also the Out of Sight performance that you did in 2013 that I also shared with people on Facebook earlier this week. So.
Yeah. Is my mic working okay?
Yes, I can hear you. Can everybody hear CV?
Okay. Yes, so I think it's always been a part of me. I've always been really drawn to both my Mars side as well as my Venus side, and growing up it was really cultivated by my family. They were very embracing of myself and my sisters doing if we wanted to do something, we could do something. And I think it just, at first, subconsciously came out into my work. And then, of course, when you're part of an art community and people see your work and the discourse that happens post performances, it was brought more and more to my attention by my peers. So it did become something that I started to engage in a little bit more purposefully. While previously, I think it was just more of a subconscious decision. And I have to admit, now it's kind of returned to a subconscious position, but I definitely see it there.
Yeah, I think, I was delighted to see the hydraulic architecture video because, and I think this comes back to this idea of, the rural city identity as well. Growing up, I grew up on Dartmoor for some time in England, in the southwest, which is very much a farm country, and would help my girlfriends on their farms during the summer or spring breaks, with lambing season and things like this. You just have to get stuck in and, deal with the labor of working on a farm. And there is, and you yourself have grown up on a farm in the country, and so this idea of identity kind of, you just have to get into the labor of doing the business of taking care of these animals, and it's a lot of labor and it's a lot of care, and there is this reciprocal return of that care with the animals. And so I think there is this, whereas in the city we get stereotyped into specific. I wonder if there's more stereotyping in the city of specific identities. There's more categorization happening, maybe. I don't know if you find that.
Perhaps. I wonder, like, I'm now in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, and it's by our standards in Wisconsin, it's a city, right? But to anyone in Chicago, where I got my master's, it's a town, right? But it is a large space to those of us from more of a rural community. And I think because there are less bodies here to inhabit multiple identities is accepted. So while I'm here, I can identify as artist, I can identify as non-binary, as queer, but I can also identify as female and feminist. And there's a space for me as an individual to be accepted within those communities. Well, I think there were just so many communities in Chicago that it was easy to specialize in a sense, and a desire to specialize. But I don't think that's the case everywhere. I don't know. I think it depends on the human being and whether or not they want to specialize versus be more broad. And I find myself, having left Chicago, definitely being more broad with my identity and exploring other facets of it that maybe I previously didn't explore very much.
Yeah, I think I recently had somebody come write an email. Actually, they might be tuning in today, and they came out as they, and as a person, they have chosen to use the identity of they. And I was sharing with them that up until the 1920s, all of the Bronte sisters' novels used the pronoun of they when they were referring to any gendered identity in their novels. And it wasn't until the 1920s that the publisher, after they had passed away, decided to gender define all the characters in their novels. And, and somebody asked me, I was in conversation with a person a little while ago, and they said to me, well, I just identify as you do. And I said, well, I identify sometimes as a woman, but then sometimes as a person. I don't necessarily see myself as always being a woman in the eyes of the other. And so I think, do you think this kind of, and I was just reading about this yesterday, do you think this kind of fluidity of gender definitions actually creates greater room for equality of perception moving forward?
Yeah, I think so. I think it opens us up to the other a little bit more. I know when I started exploring it, it opened me up to my work after this has really moved into non-human body, right? Focusing on fungus or slime mold, and that exploration of that being the next sentient being, and bring forth further, I think, the non-binary conversation by accepting these beings as, fungus is non-gendered, as is slime mold, and so to have these be the next sentient beings of my series has really allowed me to explore that conversation, I think, a little bit more.
Yeah, and so moving on to the second video that we shared today, you're very much employing humor as a strategy within your work. And, talking about other sentient beings, you talk about the dinosaurs only leaving bones on the planet, whereas we're leaving this plastic encrusted surface. And so, how are you thinking about humor in your performances, to talk about environmentalism or a human relationship with nature?
Yeah, great question. I attempted to be serious in my earlier works. As a human being, I am a humorous person. I fall back on humor quite a bit. And so to not recognize that part of myself into trying to be more stoic and poetic and serious really didn't fit and didn't feel right in my earlier pieces. So I ended up just embracing it. The Mykitos Epoch as a whole is this fictional rendering of post-human Earth, right? When we're extinct and plastic is our legacy, and fungus is the next sentient being to roam the Earth. And I'm not a writer, so the thought of making a series of books, while it appealed at first, I realized it would be actually very hard for me to do. So I got interested more into performances, installations, sculpting with fungus, to try and actually bring forth, hopefully in time, a large installation where you as the viewer can enter my fictional world. But there is a whimsy to it that I at first tried to push away from, and it kept coming back. So I've just really embraced that whimsy and in the sense of the dark humor. And having now exhibited portions of this work at different museums and colleges and art centers, and the conversation that comes from it from viewers of very different backgrounds has been that humor seems to connect with them. It gets them talking more. And they realize it's actually a bit of a gallows humor, a little bit. It's definitely more of a dystopic, but it's done in such a playful way oftentimes that it feels accessible even to the very young. Like 5-year-olds and 6-year-olds can still enjoy my work. While they might not have the strong conversation, their parents can still be like, so what about recycling, right? And so there is that kind of conversation. And I just feel like humor can bring that forward a little bit, can be a foil a little bit from more of the serious works that are out there, which are equally important. But I think to have a foil, to have the alternative way of introducing it to an audience, I think that's important too.
Yeah, well, it reminds me of the I studied earlier on, you know, Charlie Chaplin and Buster Keaton, and how they used comedy to actually communicate very complex political and social ideas. So there is a history of using humor to communicate. So, you know, in terms of your process, I mean, I really think of like, there's a thread that goes through all of your work, you know, like how do you create a performance, just out of interest?
Normally,
or how yeah.
Oh, okay. I was just going to say, normally there is at least more recently, there's been research, some sort of article, whether or not it's a cultural article or a scientific journal article. I've been reading a lot of scientific journals recently. And normally there's like a tidbit, right? Like a sentence that just like catches my attention. And then I just kind of stew on that. And I'm like, that was new information to me. How do I bring that information in an accessible way to a different audience who might not read the same journal that I read, right? There's so much information out there, and people pick and choose, right, what they enjoy and what they dive into and what they read. So how do I bring something I found interesting and I found new and informative and bring it forward? So I think that's like the start of my performances. And then after I graduated from the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, the Mykitos Epoch, the Fungus era, really became my highlight focus. So everything kind of revolved around, okay, this is fascinating. How do I bring it into my universe? And so I had like a focal point to kind of go into as well.
Yeah, and I think there's a wonderful, there is this kind of this scientific element in your work, even in, I mean, you know, even in the actual building and creating of a piece of work, the fungi is going through this alchemical process. The salt crystals that we saw in the video earlier is, you know, over time, it's creating this encrusted surface and forming crystals. And, you know, it reminds me of the scientific experiments we used to do in biology, you know, in school, you know, where you would like heat some salt under a Bunsen burner and all that. And, you know, but, you know, all of these alchemical processes really need time. And, you know, you've incorporated durational performance work into your performances. The 2015 piece that you did for Out of Sight was working 9 to 5 over several days on the pavement and talking with the public. So thinking about nature and the presence of the body, there is this sense of time, which, you know, either the body becomes invisible or it becomes, you know, part of the narrative, like in the last video we showed, you know, and at the core of all your practice both as a performer and creating art, you know, why is time so important to you as an artist?
Oh,
Because it's really at the heart of, it's at the heart of all the work. You know, you talked about the hydraulic architecture and how you'd wish, how that left this mark, this drawing in the fields after, you know, in the following spring. You know, there is this appreciation of time.
Yeah, I think time for me, I just had a conversation with a good friend recently, and they pointed out that to me, a piece that I make is only precious to me if it has a lot of labor, right? Is labor intensive and has a lot of time, right? Something that I can do very quickly, I don't find precious at all, even though someone else might really like it, right? Sometimes I'll do, daily sketches, and to me they're just sketches and they just pile up in my studio, but because they didn't take a lot of labor, a lot of time, I don't give them a lot of respect, right? But time and labor have always really, for me, been a mark in my artwork of something that I, as the artist, find relevant. And when it comes to the environmental work I do, there has to be time. Things take time. And in a sense, time being a human construct, the different seasons mean I can do different things at different moments. And so if I'm doing a piece, let's say outside, I have to wait for the, Wisconsin third snow to melt, and I have to wait for the mud to harden, and I have to wait for the grass to grow before I can do something outside up here, right? And then our seasons are so short that I have to keep that into consideration too, that if I can't get something done within the first timeline, I have to wait a whole year before I can get it done for the second. And I have to accept that, right? There has to be an okay feeling with that. I can work on other things as I wait for that timeline to come back around. And in my fungus sculptures, right, that I create using this bio-alternative for styrofoam donated by Ecovactive Design, that takes time too. Not as much as you would think, but the grow period in my fungus greenhouse, black house, whatever, it's this dark cave that's very humid that my fungus flourishes in. It takes time, and at the same time, it's a living organism, so it might not do what I want it to do. Like my last sculpture, I had to throw into the compost heap because it grew mold on it. And so, that was time that was in a sense wasted, but it was also a failure that taught me various things about my greenhouse, right? Maybe the season wasn't right when I was doing it, something cultivated those, mold spores better than the fungal spores. So it's just that kind of conversation of trial and error and being okay that things take a little bit more time than the 2 weeks that a college art assignment has trained us as artists to work fast.
I hope not. I think that was fundamental to my training at Goldsmiths, actually, where I was really taught to be an artist. I really was able to develop my work over 3 years. And it was a bit of a shock to me coming and studying in America. I was like, I have to do something for this class. I have my own ideas. I'm on a research path. So, thinking about, but I love the fact that time and this relationship with nature is really at the heart of your work, and the labor that is involved in that reciprocal relationship, acknowledging. So I want to shout out, I want to open it up for questions from the audience. So if you have a question for CV, please type it in the chat. And but before we I also wanted to think about, you know, this, you know, you talked about the mold growing on the spores, and this idea of experimentation, you know, is very much a part of the creative process over time. And can you share what experimentations are you, because I know that you're always like experimenting with different materials. What materials are you investigating at the moment?
Oh, so many. I'm investigating so I've been painting or drawing with mechanics grease, right, that I just get from my local co-op here. In fact, my dad, who's a rancher, was talking to the co-op manager and was talking about what I was doing, and they then like donated a bunch of grease, right? They're like, oh, here, have her paint with this. That was kind of fun. It's just like, it's the grease that you put in a tractor or in a semi, right, to get it going. And so I've been experimenting with like, how does that deal with paper or canvas? You know, does it just slide right off? Does it eat away at it? You know, what happens? Like, does it age? You know, grease isn't supposed to cure, right? You know, it's supposed to stay viscous and slimy, because that's what keeps our, you know, ball bearing, you know, movement in our vehicles, right? So it's this question of like this non-drying pollutant. So I've been playing with that, still working with fungus, exploring that. And then I started, once again, this is kind of on the time and the seasons thing, I started collecting various botanicals from my parents' ranch. And I'm trying to actually make my own botanical inks and dyes. And so I made some out of my mom's peonies, and they seem to have failed miserably, but they're still like aging. And so I'll see if they do better in a few months.
Actually, CV, this really connects with a question from Laura.
Okay.
And she says, it sounds like your experience growing up on the farm influences your work when it comes to time, seasons, and cycles. Does that ring true for you? And you just talking about the botanicals.
It rings even more true now that I'm older and I can like look back on my art, right? Sometimes you don't see things when it's right in front of your face. It takes, you know, a few years to like, oh, that's what that piece meant, kind of vibe. But I have a new horse, and she's 3 this year, and I can't ride her yet because when horses are, from my dad and my practice of horse training, you don't get on a horse younger than 3. You might like do some groundwork with them, but once they turn 3, then you can like put a human body, particularly one my size or a little bit smaller, on this horse, and it won't like hurt the growth of the horse, right? But it takes time. So I've had this horse since it was a yearling, and I've had to wait, right, until this year when I can finally start to train her on how to ride with me. But even then, it will probably take another 5 years before I truly trust her, right? So there's this action and this labor and this time and this acknowledgement that when you might take 2 steps forward and 1 step back, but that's okay because you're still moving in a forward trajectory. And I think that's how I view my artwork as well. It's like I dream of a huge installation, but I know that each year I make 1 more piece and 1 more piece and 1 more piece. And hopefully in 10 years, I will have enough to create that huge installation. And so, yeah, I definitely think growing up on a farm and learning patience and having the seasons was really important.
And we have another question in the chat. It takes a machine that weighs 4,000, oh, I don't know, 47,000 pounds to put a seed that weight is 1/6 of an ounce. I think this might be in British or European measurements, and 1.5 inches into the soil. Can you talk about the energy ratio of what we do and what we know? This is an interesting mathematical question in terms of thinking about labor and time.
Yeah, for sure. I think this is a great question. Growing up where I do, when we have our own personal gardens, right, that only is to feed our family and maybe to share with our neighbors, it's all done by hand, right? There's this ritual, right, of this seeding and the weeding and the growing. But then surrounding us, right, are these farm fields that are supposed to have huge production. And to do it by hand for that same ritual or that same sacredness that to cultivate one's personal garden would have is lost. So the big machineries can do things exponentially faster, can do things much more accurately. But it is, cultivating an ecosystem for a human-centric point of view. And I think that's where my work comes into play as well, as I'm interested in the blurred boundaries that the rural landscape gives, which is, the nature versus the human developed, and how even as we cultivate these spaces, right, for us, right, we're cultivating food for either ourselves or for our livestock, which will be, slaughtered for us once again, right? It's all very human-centric. Even in that, the non-human ecosystems creep between the cracks and still flourish, and we're oftentimes completely oblivious to it. So my interest is that no matter how we contain or have consideration for how we manipulate the land, there is oftentimes an unrecognizable effect by other ecosystems in it. So I'll admit my father is a rancher rather than a traditional farmer. So the equipment we use definitely is not the same as someone who's cultivating the land for crops. But I think that's a capitalistic, but also a societal action, right? To feed the urban spaces, we need to really cultivate the rural to create that food source, whether or not. But in my region, most of the food source we make is actually not for humans. It's for the animals that then become food source, or the animals that have dairy and things like that. So the corn that we grow up here is not for human consumption.
And I just want to, if you're interested in an expanded dialogue about that, we had a really interesting conversation with Regen last week about nature specifically in America and accessibility. But I think the way in which you talk about the relationship you have with your horse and how that is this reciprocal relationship. Like, you learn so much more from your relationship with a horse as you would, with another human or the botanical flowers. So there is this depth of knowledge that comes from that intimate relationship with another sentient being, which I've been more aware of, having just lost my cat over the holidays. So, it is, how do we commune with others in the world in a more holistic way?
Mm-hmm.
So we're coming to the end of the conversation with CV today. So I just want to share with everybody what we've got coming up next. And we're very excited to announce that on April 21st, we're going to be opening the Public Performance Symposium. Now, this is really part of our extended conversation, and thinking about as we come out of the pandemic and we come out of lockdowns across the world, how are we bringing, and I had a wonderful conversation with Marilyn Awesome this week, who's going to be doing a 4-day workshop as part of the symposium, really talking about the need for joy and surprise in our lives. And again, thinking about how we can create these reciprocal relationships, both with sight and place, but with each other as humans. And as we come out of our lockdown quarantine situations. And, I am an advocate of public performance. I think it increases public safety as well, and but also brings joy and surprise and beauty into the world. And with the Out of Sight program, we're particularly interested in cultivating a dialogue. So the artist community decided to create a public performance symposium, and we have 6 artists will be giving workshops throughout for the first 2 weeks, from April 22nd to I think it's May the 6th, and then we will be and let me move to the next. So the tickets will be going on sale on April the 1st, which is a week next Friday. And I'm just going to play this a little bit. And if you have any questions about this, please pop your questions in the chat. And we are delighted to announce that Alistair McLennan will be one of the artists presenting his work at the Public Performance Symposium on Saturday, April 24th at 10 a.m. CST. And so this is, if you sign up to attend the Public Performance Symposia, you will be able to engage in practice-based performance workshops that last for 3 or 4 days. Each workshop is 90 minutes long. And at the end, in week 3, symposium attendees will be trained in live stream techniques specifically for live performance, and you'll be able to present the performance in live streaming on May the 7th and May the 8th as part of the symposium. And Ika Trinks is curating an event with international artists on May the 9th as a finale to the symposium. So, as I mentioned, early bird tickets are going on sale on April the 1st, and those are $100. And the first 40 people will have priority in selecting which 3 workshops they wish to attend, and all participants will receive live stream training and the opportunity to perform. After the first 40 tickets are sold, we will be presenting a lecture package, which will be for $50. And there we have 11 internationally acclaimed artists presenting their public performance practice. So this is a really going to be an exciting event from April 22nd to May the 9th. And there's actually, there's going to be some happy hours that CV is in on concocting as we speak. And so if you have any questions about this, please pop your questions in the chat. And again, this is really about us expanding practice and in public space, so we can really bring joy to people as we come out of pandemic times. And also, if you'd like to support Out of Sight and the public performance programming that we do, please consider subscribing to our Twitch channel. And if you're on the YouTube, please subscribe below. We're building an archive of these conversations. And just to give a little synopsis of what we talked about today with CV, you know, we really talked about the interrelationship between the land and creative practice, and how it takes time. There's labor involved, there's thinking, there's experimentation. And in this experimentation, sometimes it doesn't work, but we learn from these experimentations, and that time is very critical. And the sentient relationships we can build with flowers and with animals as part of that process. And at the beginning of the conversation, we talked about gender bending and androgyny, and using different pronouns, and what that means to CV as part of our process. And that also is embedded in the real living as a person, as a human being on this planet. So I want to thank you all for joining us in this conversation today, where we went deep with CV Peterson about her art. And please, tickets will go on sale on April 1st for the Public Performance Symposium. And next week, I will be in conversation with Wanapa P. Eubanks. So I hope you will join us then for the going deep with Wanapa P. Eubanks. And many thanks for listening, and have a lovely Saturday wherever you are. Okay, thank you and goodbye. CV, do you have a few words?
No, just thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful weekend.
Bye-bye.